So Emmett, Optimera XG operates in Western Alaska, and that's an area with significant connectivity challenges. Can you explain how your networks are designed to meet the unique demands of these regions?
So I got started in this business almost 20 years ago now, trying to solve the communication challenges that we had on Alaska. So what we have done is we've designed a network and a concept specifically around small rural communities. So my background is in applied mathematics and computer science. I was born and raised, well, technically not born, but raised in Alaska. And when I came back to make money in the summer to go back to college, I couldn't get online. So that's what we started with. I happened to work with a couple people who are very talented developers and engineers, and we decided that we were going to just build our own platforms. I realized that this is not what most people do or can do, but what we want to do is actually allow everybody to use this platform because it was built specifically for rural communities. So we can do things less expensive than everybody else. We also have a lot of experience with everything that doesn't work. I like to say I can stand on a mountain of failures because that's really how you learn, is you try and then you fail and then you try again and you just keep trying until something works.
So what innovations has Optimera XG introduced to improve network sustainability and performance in Alaska?
So we are, I think, the first independently founded mobile network operator in Alaska. We did it in-house. So I think everybody's focused right now a lot on broadband, and we've been doing broadband for, again, 20 years. Internet, data. Voice is an incredibly important aspect of communication networks. I think it flies under the radar. It's taken for granted. But when you need to call 911, you really want that service to work. And so our innovation is enabling tribal communities to have their own mobile networks so that they can use them how they need. They can build networks in the areas that they want to build, not where a company decides is the best or most profitable place to build. I think as a local person myself, we have built towers and done things in areas that arguably didn't make financial sense for us, but we wanted to use them. And so it's a different concept when you're talking or looking at it from a tribal perspective. It's never about money. It's about what's best for the tribe and the community and making these things work. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Emmett. The next question I'm going to ask of Brandon Craig. Windtalker Innovations is known for its wireless technologies. How does your company's technology enhance the sustainability and capacity of broadband networks in Alaska, Brandon?
Hey, Brandon Craig, Windtalker Innovations. So it's important as we talk about this that you know that we're a software company who's trying to help hardware companies make solutions that are better for you all. So it's important for us to know what you need so that we can make sure that we're trying to deliver that. So when it comes to sustainability and capacity, we think about this a lot differently than the existing manufacturers think about this because we're in innovations and software companies, so we're trying to go to the next step. What's the next step? When we think of sustainability, what does the future hold for connectivity? We have to ask that question. That's our jobs. What we've essentially created is a way for networks for equipment in the networks to relay information between one another. Okay, so if this device can't see the device it's supposed to see to get the internet. When I say see, it's wirelessly see or through a wire. If it can't see that, then it finds another way, okay? And your data finds a way to where it needs to go. Because we've got that ability, there are things that we can do to keep your information in your village or in your community. So if you need to be able to communicate, but it's going to be 5 years before you have an internet backhaul source, well, we can give you that ability to communicate with basic communications immediately. And when that backhaul source shows up, you plug it in and now you have internet, but you already had the equipment in place and you were able to do things like have a message board for your community or do emergency notifications or broadcast, those kinds of things, because you put the end equipment in place first and we make that equipment able to talk to each other. Does that make sense? So from a sustainability perspective, we can do what I just said in Wi-Fi today, okay, and that's what we're working with right now. But we're working on ways that I'll talk about in an hour or so in my keynote about how we're going to expand that. But as we increase the amount of stuff that can happen without the internet, we decrease how much internet we need. And that's something we don't think anybody else is doing. And so that's how I would address sustainability of our internet resources.
So, Brandon, what does sustainability mean in the context of broadband networks, and how do you envision maintaining this over the next decade?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a 6-year-old, and so it's nice to, it's just I get a lot of practice in trying to explain things in really simple ways. It also means that I may oversimplify things for my audience. Sometimes forgive me if I do. But to me, sustainability is real easy in this context. We have to make the supply of internet service greater than the demand of internet service, okay? We need to have so much internet that it's coming out of our ears and everybody can have it and it's free because it's just everywhere, right? That's our win. That's like the best. If you could wave a wand, that's what you would do, right? For now, we have to at least get to a place where the supply and demand are equal. Right now, we don't have enough supply for the demand that we have. We need to get that to equal, and then we need to increase the supply until it becomes cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper over the long term. So how do we do that? We have to address this a different way. Gone are the days when there was one wire spanning the Atlantic or Pacific to connect you to other continents in the world. We have satellites, we have really robust infrastructure, all kinds of it. We need to figure out different ways to connect it. And right now, everything you're buying is based on a 30 or 40-year-old network service computer code that's never been replaced because it's really hard to replace it. And that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Brandon. My next question is to Lisa Hanlon, TelTech Group. TelTech Group has significant experience in implementing technology solutions. What is your approach to ensuring that broadband networks remain sustainable over time in areas with high operational challenges such as Alaska?
So from a TelTech perspective, TelTech, we are more of a value-added reseller, distributor, equipment supplier. So, been in business 25 years, have worked the tier 1s, tier 2s, 3s, the wireless internet service providers, and then over the last 7-8 years, we've been heavily focused on tribal and rural. I think from what I've seen, after the pandemic, there was a lot of money thrown at the tribal communities, and it was so quick and so fast. I think there was a lot of the tribes were overwhelmed, so there was not proper planning in designing and building the networks. And I think the whole goal which was key, was getting broadband for education and telehealth. I think, looking back now and as we continue to work with the tribal communities, it's what I'm seeing, and I think the ones that are going to be successful and sustaining their network are those that really have the community engagement, understand kind of what the community needs, and it's not going to be the same for every community. And then it goes down to actually properly planning that network and making sure it's sustainable and can grow, with the demand. And then I think it comes down to it's going to be a hybrid. It's not going to be one solution fits everybody. Between geography, especially up here in Alaska, it's you guys have pretty much every kind of environmental thing. So I think it's going to be a hybrid network to be sustainable. And then really having kind of public-private partnerships. A lot of the funding coming out covers CapEx but not OpEx, and maintaining these networks are not cheap. So there's got to be long-term oversight of how you're going to make sure that you can maintain the network. Because I think there's a lot of skepticism that people keep saying, all this money is going into building these networks, but they're not going to be sustainable. While, yeah, they can be sustainable, but there just has to be the proper planning. So from my perspective, and then another thing too, key, what we've kind of struggled with is workforce development. It's really hard to get a workforce to go out into some of these tribal communities. So, if we can have a robust workforce development plan to encourage the younger generation and the community to actually want to help maintain the network, that would be key in my mind.
Lisa, how can public-private partnerships enhance the sustainability of broadband networks?
Good question. So I think with public-private partnership, you have kind of the best of both worlds. You've got, you can leverage technical expertise, funding. There's a lot of, I think that it's a win-win for everybody if you can have that. Because like I said, going back to the cost of sustaining these networks, it's going to have to be come from both sides. It's going to have to come from both public and private to make them successful.
Thank you, Lisa. Tim Jaeger. So Semtech Corporation plays a pivotal role in delivering wireless technologies. Can you share how your technologies are improving network sustainability and connectivity in Alaska?
So, hello. So with Semtech, that we've bought Sierra Wireless and are now marketing it under the Semtech name. But Sierra has well over 30 years of history of delivering networks out there that for both public safety and private. So for sustainability, we need to be able to design and deploy networks that can use multiple technologies, whether it's Brandon's Windtalker technologies or some other proprietary technologies that are out there that can also be done over multiple portions of the radio spectrum or wireline spectrum that is out there. That is the only way you're going to be able to start to sustain these networks, is to embrace all the technologies and turn them into hybrid networks out there.
What are the emerging trends, Tim, in wireless technology that are most relevant for rural broadband deployment?
Up here in Alaska, 2.5 gigahertz spectrum is very available, and we're starting to see through the NTIA and various manufacturers out there deploying networks that are interoperable with not only the 2.5 spectrum, but also spectrum that are owned by other areas or free spectrum that's out there. That's going to be one of the key areas to keep things sustainable.
Thank you. Anika, how does the digital divide specifically impact tribal communities in Alaska? And what unique considerations need to be made when designing solutions for these communities?
Skigsyadik, Anabanya Anika Evans with Nakaani Technologies. And I'm very happy to be here with you today. Good morning. My name is Anika Evans, and I'm here with Nakaani Technologies. And I am very privileged to speak with you today. And in consideration of Alaskan villages and the unique situations that you guys are in, I think one of the most important things that you can do for your villages is, one, come to these meetings. Learn as much as you can about it as the leaders, and then go home and talk to the people, talk to your neighbors, talk to your grandchildren about what you're learning here. Because the decisions that you make and the consultation that is or is not occurring with your tribe, with your carriers, is so important. The incumbent carriers like GCI, they have a mandatory requirement. Even the co-op carriers have a mandatory requirement to come and talk with you on an annual basis. We talked a little bit yesterday, if you weren't here, about Universal Service Fund. That is a fee on the bottom of every phone bill across the entire United States, from Puerto Rico to Hawaii, from California to Maine. And every single phone subscriber, whether it's cellular or plain old telephone service, pays into that pot. And every incumbent carrier across the United States gets that money. And some of that money is used for tribal broadband and for access to some of the other spectrum. There is a mandatory requirement of those carriers to meet with you on an annual basis every single year. And it's not just them sending a letter and it landing in the tribal coordinator's hand and the tribal coordinator signs off on it and sends it back. It is required to go before leadership. I am from Gila River Indian Community south of Phoenix, and our tribal council gets every year an annual report from our tribally owned telecommunications company. And they accept it in the form of a tribal resolution. And then when Gila River Telecommunications moves forward every year with getting their funding, whether it was previously through USDA RUS loans or currently through other venues because we've created some subsidiaries, it's also knowing that in your villages that your health care and your education and your public safety, that there are funding mechanisms for bringing communications into your villages. With public safety, back in 2012, we established FirstNet. That is a first responder network on a whole different level of spectrum. Then we also have the education stuff. We have the E-rate. We have that universal service fund coming out to fund the telecommunications or that connectivity into your healthcare facilities and your schools. So you can't always use that funding to build out the infrastructure. But then the other thing is understanding between yourselves and between your villages that in my language and in my culture, we have so'hut. If you've ever been to the Southwest, you see the little man that stands in the center of the maze. He lived in a mountain, and he lived inside some caves, and it's really dark in there. But we would go and we would go and talk to him because he really understood. He grew to be a very old man, and he could really advise us. He was our elder brother. And Nakaani means brother-in-law. And he's a person who can go and help negotiate and go and carry communication. Amongst the villages, you need to talk to each other. When these plans are put forward by a co-op or by a native corporation or by a village or by a tribe, sometimes there's overlap. And that overlap has to be worked out among ourselves. We have to use the wisdom of our elders, and we have to use the wisdom that we know of from our native traditions. Even in my own tribe, we ran from village to village and had face-to-face conversations with one another. And sometimes, even in the bad weather, we might have to go village to village and ride through the ice on a river and get to the other village to have a conversation so we can talk about how are we going to divide up these billions of dollars that are coming to Alaska, that this village claimed my money or my infrastructure. We have to work together. I can't get out to the furthest village if I can't come through the first village, whether I'm running there or canoeing there or building out a line. And so we have to work together. The co-ops are a really, really great opportunity. You hear that they're member-owned. That means every person who has a phone line is part of that ownership. And in our tribe, we vote as members at an annual meeting. We come together and we vote about what is the build out going to be this year? What are our priorities going to be? What is the finances of this company? They publicly report to us. And we vote. We raise our hands and we say yes, or we abstain, or we vote no. And you have to participate. And I really applaud Marietta Aiken for getting on her phone board in her co-op area. She is a village member who's going there and serving and learning about telecommunications and going back to her villages. And those are the biggest challenges, is getting the understanding. Spectrum is a resource, and it is as valuable to your communities as the oil or the ground that you live on.
Thank you for that, Anika. And you touched on it, but I'm just going to pull that thread a little bit farther with you and ask you, what role do tribal organizations and co-ops like Nakaani Technologies play in delivering the right solutions to ensure digital sovereignty and equitable access for the communities? I told you I was going to pull that thread a little more.
I worked for the information technology arm of my tribe for the past decade. And I actually was there in 1997 when Intel first came and helped us to connect our schools across our reservation. They gave us all their retired equipment from their networks, and we put it out into the schools and the classrooms. But over the years, what I saw was Forest County, Potawatomi over in Wisconsin, they built a data center. And so I wanted my tribe to build a data center too. And what we did is we put a building by our tribal government office, and it's right close to the closest central office of our telephone company, so that we were able to connect fiber into our data center, and we build our servers. We put server farms, and in our phone company at our main location where our trunks are coming into our community, we built a room where we could co-locate with our servers, so that our tribal businesses put their servers within our own community on our own reservation. So our servers that were serving our email for our students and for our tribal government, our court systems, our healthcare systems, our systems that were supporting our casinos, they're all co-located into our central office, so that we're keeping our data on the reservation as much as possible. Then we build a data center down by our government center, and we have all of our servers there. Now, the trouble that we run into is that required us to grow a lot of expertise within our own tribe. And then we get a lot of retired military people that are very well versed in the communications understanding of cybersecurity and how the internet and the network and it all works together. And we built and we built and we built. But we keep our data mostly on reservation. The biggest challenge was when COVID came and we had a lot of employees who work off reservation. They didn't want to come to the office. We were only allowed to have one person in the office at a time, so we would rotate our staff, and a lot of people had to work from home, but they live off reservation and they wanted to be able to access the systems. So we set up private tunnels, a virtual private network, so that they could access from home into our network. Well, some people come from different jurisdictions and they're used to having their data in the cloud. Many of you are used to having your data in the cloud. Your data, as someone mentioned earlier, is down in Seattle or maybe here in Anchorage. But it doesn't take a great big stack of servers to do everything that you need to do. And you might have one here in this building and one over here. Maybe one is closer to the tribal government building, but one is way up on a hill where if a tsunami comes, that one lives. We make backups. We make tape backups, and we take them and we put them in a fire safe. And then the one that's in the fire safe, we take that one and we put it off-site. And then we take another one from that one that's off-site and we go put it in a building, in a locked locked up place in Phoenix. So you have to back up your data. You have to make your data local. It's not sovereign if it's not within your sovereign boundaries. If once it leaves your boundaries, then you're dealing with your interstate, inside your state, and then it's state. I'm dealing with you if you have my server at your location. And then if it goes into Seattle, then I'm dealing with intrastate, and then I'm dealing with Department of Commerce, and then maybe a circuit court. As Gila River, we've been there, we've had these battles, but so some people are moving our data, they get ideas and they come to our tribal council and they say, but I need access to be able to defend, I'm your public defender, and you have obligation to your inmates to get them in court and out of court within 3 days. So I need to access their data from home. And so they make decisions, sometimes that's beyond our control, but you have the opportunity to understand, where is my data gonna live? Sometimes it moves to Missouri, and then you're in a totally different district. So data sovereignty, a lot is keeping it at home. But once you have that local network and you can get to your data center from your house, wireless, like he was saying, you can transfer the data over a microwave link. It can be very low spectrum, or it can be cellular, or it can be satellite, or it can be physical copper or fiber. And copper works really good too. Even though they say the best networks are fiber, fiber goes really fast. It's the speed of light. Obviously, it's faster than the speed of sound. But the switches and the gear in the middle now is very capable of sending gigabit data over copper. So I encourage you to look at all of the solutions, but be very aware of where your data is. Because if it's in Seattle, and it's on a Microsoft server, make sure you're in a government space, not in a personal space or not in an educational space. There's different spaces and they have different levels of security that other people have worked really hard. Ransomware is a really big thing. Our tribe got ransomwared. Our banks, Bank of America got ransomwared. Banner Health got ransomwared out of Colorado. States got ransomwared, where hackers from Russia are coming in and locking down your data and encrypting it. Thankfully, we turned everything off really quick and saved our data.
So I think you just created a new verb. Ransomware. I mean, it's a pejorative thing, obviously, but it's cool. I like it. Brandon, I'm going to come to you in a second, but real quick, Anika, could you tell me the frequency with which you do those backups?
So it depends on what kind of data is. Obviously, casino data, court data, public safety. Public safety is backed up every hour. The court data is backed up every night. All the tribal departments, whether it's transportation or tribal social services, it's every night. And then the casinos backed up every hour to half hour, depending on which system it is. Obviously, the monetary systems are the most important systems, and then the security systems are the next most important systems. And we just go based on how it is. And then we don't do tape backups every day. We have actually a big, huge terabyte server, multiple terabytes, that saves all of our data, but we've been doing data storage since 1995. So we have 30 years almost of data that we're storing and people keep everything. People use their emails as file cabinets, which is not a great practice, because that's the first thing the ransomware is going to go after.
Guilty as charged. So you gave us a lot to chew on, and I'm going to ask Brandon, he's got a comment. I'm going to also ask the other panelists to chime in just based off of things you've heard or things you thought of while she was sharing that. Go ahead, Brandon.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, first of all, that's amazing what you guys have built. And if I want to make sure from a sustainability perspective, and you talked about it too, Lisa, was the ability to execute, the ability to put these things together has to be addressed, right? It's the simplicity of the network. How do you, if you, and what I want to encourage everyone out here, what we're doing with our partners, like, friends like Lisa and others, what we're doing is we're trying to create what you've just described that is affordable enough for a 70-house village to be able to do that and to set it up and run it themselves. And we actually have made tremendous strides in that, and that's why we're doing the partnerships we're doing, but we're helping our partners. We ourselves are not trying to compete. We're trying to help companies that are doing those kinds of things make it so easy and so affordable that everyone can do what she just described.
Emmett, could you reflect a little bit about what you heard?
I'm still digesting because that was a lot. I followed along exactly what you were talking about because these are all issues that we've faced and talked about over time. Storing data, how best to do that, the technical challenges that are associated with data storage, and I think one of the things that you brought up that was is the idea of sovereignty and the idea of what it means to own your data, and at the root of even though tribal.network is a platform as a service, we're delivering that service in a way that allows you to have inbound, outbound roaming. It reduces the barriers, but we also had a very specific design requirement when we went into it, and that was that if this system is ever to be cut off from the rest of the world, that it continues to work. And when we brought that up to the engineers that helped us build this thing, a lot of those folks were internal to Optimera, but they we of course you outsource and you consult and you contract. They had never heard of somebody saying that that's what they wanted to do, and I was like, no, every single cell phone tower should be standalone, so that if there's an emergency, it still works. It gets cut off, but guess what? You're still rocking and rolling. I think that's like the at its core. We have to be able to use the cloud because it gives us so many things, but at the same time, you need to have the ability to have that on site and own it, right? I think, it's a very powerful idea.
Tim, you want to share anything you've reflected on here?
Yeah, to build a little bit on what you were saying. Yeah, thank you.
Or mic is strong.
To build in a little bit of what you're saying, you referenced all the various technologies that are out there. Okay, is that better? Nobody likes to hear me talk, so that's why I put it down. To build on what you were saying with the various technologies that are out there, you have to see what is viable in your area. And with what you're talking about, with what Gila River did and has built down in Arizona, can be replicated up here very easily. You just need to be able to use the technologies and work with the companies that will work within your sovereignty rules that you have as well.
Lisa?
I'll say Gila River, you guys have done an amazing job, and there's the National Tribal Telecom Association, the NTTA. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but they have twice a year at Gila River 2 broadband conferences they're actually very, very good. It's a great way to network and meet other tribal broadband participants, as well as they do a great job of 101 of broadband and bring together a lot of vendors and different workshops around, key thing. I think the last couple broadband conferences have been really around cybersecurity, because that's the next thing we really have to be focusing on. We can build these networks, but going back to your point, they need to make sure that they're secure. It's critical. We have an organization called the Native American Business Association that I sit on the board. We're a nonprofit. And there's a lot of different funding mechanisms for tribal communities to go after to help with their cybersecurity. For instance, we had someone from the Department of Energy come in and speak to our members. And I didn't realize it at the time, but they'll go in to any tribal community, DOE will, and they'll do a energy assessment and a free cybersecurity assessment for every tribal nation. And once you do that assessment and you get the findings back, then you can go and apply for grant funding to help with that. So there's a lot of other kind of funding mechanisms out there that the government does a great job. And there's a lot of funding. It's just really hard to navigate and get to where all that funding sits.
We're going to do some audience Q&A here in a few minutes, but another question I have, and this is for anyone who wants to take it, is, what can you utilize that you're up here, talking about your area of expertise and your capabilities that can support the middle mile and backhaul providers?
Can you say that again?
Sure. What can your capabilities, as a subject matter expert in your company, what can you utilize or bring to the table to help support middle mile construction and backhaul providers? Anika.
I think that is really important as a community to talk with the coordinators and the community managers or the city managers and know what the long-term capital improvements are going to be for your community. If you're expecting to get fiber dropped off at a submarine point or at a terrestrial point or coming over or through a mountain, then plan for it. Think about which entities that you have to get with, whether it's the Bureau of Indian Affairs or whether it's your local tribal council. We have land use planning and zoning in our community. I'm sure that there are all the permitting processes that they talk about. If you know that next year, if you get that consultation and your phone provider says, we're planning to bring fiber to you next year, get in front of it and start that permitting process. Build a tower. Build a big pole for them to attach their utility. Set up the right-of-ways. Get the landowners together. Send out a letter and let all the landowners know. Get that list of people who in our tribe we have allotments and we have to get the allottees. They were made 5 generations ago. Some of those allotments are 5,000 people in one 20-acre section, and you have to contact half of the land ownership to move forward. If you have money to do buybacks, do the buybacks. Get ahead of it so that you as leadership have the right to vote forward process, whether whoever is on the council that can, city council or tribal council, that can move these projects forward. We have towers. We build the towers ourselves, and we lease the space. If T-Mobile wants to put a cellular gadget on there, we lease it to them. We have monopoles. If Verizon wants to put it on it, we actually got the cellular spectrum in a we didn't have to bid on it. It was a raffle-like kind of. We won it back in the 80s, and we kept it. And we hired a managing partner. But then you have to have customer service because nobody's going to think that you know what you're doing if you don't provide them with the customer service. But own your assets and build it. Get those right-of-ways set up now.
Anyone want to jump in? Go ahead, Brandon.
I love all of that. And I think, to me, for the middle mile and backhaul providers, they need to know what you want, right? And if you want to own all of your information and keep it at the edge, you need to let them know that that is a requirement for your village, for your community. Like, I want this. And there's that they're going to initially say that, okay, there's a price associated with that, and there's some complexity, and you need to take steps. But I think that we need to make sure everybody understands if that's a desire of the community to keep applications at the edge and to keep and to keep your data stored in your village and have complete ownership of that, then everybody needs to know that's a requirement, and then we need to build that requirement, right? And we need to make that really easy and accessible. But until people believe there's a demand, that's the way of the world, right? And the businesses aren't going to take the steps that need to be taken, because we can do that today. Like, if somebody pulled the trigger, we could put graph-based networks into place across large swaths of society pretty quickly. But they have to understand there's a need and a desire for that. And this is a very real, tangible need. You want your data to stay with you, and you want it to work even if the entire internet's down. I want communications inside of my village.
At your dispatch.
So this is another question for all the panelists, any of them that want to take it. What are the key ingredients to building not just a functional broadband network, but one that can sustain long-term reliable connectivity for Alaska's rural communities?
Regulatory compliance would be very high on that list. I think it's overlooked to some degree for people who are just getting into the space. Anika, right? I got that right?
Correct.
You had mentioned earlier, you mentioned the Universal Service Fund, and I think, Alaska and all of the rural U.S., we have service in these areas at all because of the Universal Service Fund. It was put into place 40 years ago, re-signed into law.
1996.
Yeah, yeah. So the 96 Telecom Act. And there's a lot of very specific rules and laws in there, and knowing those rules and laws are really important to making sure that you get what you are asking for, and that because they'll just come and they'll tell you, oh, well, you can't do this because of this law right here, and and then what you wanted to have happen won't happen. But the Universal Service Fund is critical to long-term sustainability of any network in Alaska, any terrestrial network. And it has to do with the massive scale of the state and the extremely low population centers, and then the massive expanse that has to be crossed to make that happen. So being able to participate in that program is incredibly important. And this is, people have been doing this for over 100 years, right? We've been building networks. So there's a lot of incumbency, and there's a lot of legacy with all of this stuff. But what I've been hearing from just about everybody, and I'm definitely one raising my hand, is we built a network in competition with two incumbent carriers but we succeeded against that. But what could we have done if we had some support? And I think if the tribes are building their own networks and owning the infrastructure, even if they do not provide the service across it, just like you had mentioned, neutral host is an excellent way to monetize infrastructure, still have that ownership, still have that sovereignty, but also create access and choice for everybody in the community and in the village. I think it's incredibly important. But when it gets to regulatory compliance, when it gets to making sure that you are communicating with the FCC every time you have an outage, and that specific term, outage. Don't say I've got a problem or the service was offline. If you say that you have an outage going on, outages have to be reported. And, by and large in the state, I think they go unreported because we've all become so used to them just going offline or going down that we just give up. And we're like, well, it's whatever it can be. And so I think, holding everybody accountable and making sure that we're going to the FCC and making sure that they hear our cases, that will help them create the rules in favor of tribes having ownership over their networks and getting the long-term support that they need from the Universal Service Fund.
Anika?
That's another thing. He mentioned the Hill. He mentioned regulation, and that's a lot of really daunting stuff for us as tribal members to understand the legal aspects of telecommunications and public safety. But if you don't understand it, then get with people who do. Ask your young people to find out about it. I studied agribusiness at Arizona State University, which is really rural business and rural policy. And by learning about the policy, then I was able to converse on the Hill with my representatives, with my congressional members, with our native desk there at the FCC, with our partners at the USDA. If you can't understand what they're saying, tell them and get them to explain it another way. They have a lot of literature that they've published online. The USDA has the Rural Utility Services section that funds electrification and telecommunications for our people. And you need to hear it from your young people and from yourselves. What do we want, like Brandon said? Because those lines in the 1996 Telecommunications Act, they were written by us and for us. We were part of that language. We at Gila River and my Hookam, those who have gone before me, went to DC with white bread and mayonnaise and a loaf of bologna in their suitcase and staying in small little corner of some tiny hotel room to be there. The Farm Bill reiterates parts of the Telecommunications Act every 4 years. And the Farm Bill is currently under consideration. And it will determine how some of the funding that was there, whether or not will be there again. Like you heard yesterday, them asking the USDA, is it gonna be there? Well, they think so, but it still hasn't gone to vote at Congress yet. So if you don't get an email from, the Hill telling you what's going on with telecommunications, but speak up. Because at National Congress of American Indians every year, we make resolutions that we take to the Hill as National Congress, representing, the 200 some odd members, 300 some odd members who come and show up and say, this is what we think the bill should say. And we've done our best over the past 25 years to protect you and to always mention Alaskan Native corporations and Alaskan Native villages and tribes. We always put you in there, but that's all we can say about you because we don't see you there at the big meetings with all the other tribes when we're sending forward big convert people to the Hill to talk about it. And then when you're here in Anchorage, make meetings with your representatives. Some of you don't even know that you had House of Representatives people at your gathering last night. And she was super cute and she bounced around a lot and you wouldn't have even known that 28-year-old person was sitting in your house representing you guys, representing us in your Alaskan legislative.
So long-term and sustainable in rural communities, I didn't anticipate you saying regulatory compliance and that was essential. What about the technological aspects, long-term sustainable connectivity in rural Alaska? I mean, I would imagine you'll say, redundancy and those types of capabilities, but anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think with, I can't remember who said it, somebody had mentioned on another panel, like redundancy is it goes with providing service. You really, you want to maintain as many nines as possible, and ideally you'd never want to go offline. That's impossible. It's an impossible task. It's going to happen. You're going to have an outage at some point in time. It's unavoidable, but you want to schedule them if you possibly can. But I think, the beyond regulatory, from a technological standpoint, being versed in the technology that is there and having an open mind to what technology works best for us and fits our needs, and then can we afford to manage it and maintain it, what fits, and it's going to be different for everybody. I think Lisa had had brought that up, is every single situation is going to be slightly different. I know another panel had also brought up that we all use satellite, we all use microwave, we all use fiber. Every network is a conglomeration. It's just like, are you more fiber heavy and less satellite, or are you more satellite and less fiber? But you kind of, it really takes a mix of everything to make it happen. I think for us, and kind of our mission is mobility. Like wireless mobility gives tribes the ability to be mobile, and that's really important. Like, we want to move around, we take it for granted when we're here, but when you get out into the village, it's not necessarily there. And so, and 2.5 gigahertz spectrum is so incredibly valuable. I mean, it's one of the most valuable spectrums that there is, especially in this next generation of communication for 5G and 6G or XG, right? Just into the future. It has the ability to give you like fiber type connectivity on a mobile device. Like, you could be walking around effectively with a fiber in your hand, and you can't do that without that capacity, and nobody else has it. So I think it's really, and in Alaska specifically, the entire state has ubiquitous access, but it requires all the tribes working together to build this network that has interoperability between all of the other tribes. And I think there's so much power in that for people. And I mean, anybody who's gone into the village has run into a situation where either the phone doesn't work, there's no service, or there's only one service provider and nobody's roaming on it. So what Anika had mentioned earlier with neutral host is build that core infrastructure and be able to get somebody out there providing service so that you have access to it. But I think the last piece is you got to have some kind of finances coming in to support it long term.
Thank you for that. Brennan?
Yeah, thanks. I have a, how can we support this long term? From a technology perspective, I think that here's the way I look at it. Billions and billions of dollars are coming to Alaska to solve this internet shortage problem, right? Now, for the companies that all exist today, the technology companies and the service providers, they want to provide you with what they have today and get it installed, okay? But you have a lot of power in this circumstance. We talk a lot about the challenges you're going to have to overcome to get these funds and all these, but you are a buyer of goods and services that are being sold. So say what you want, and if the technology doesn't exist, then those providers need to go figure out how to get those technologies if they want your business. Now, there are going to be things that we can't just wish things into existence, right? Stuff takes time to build, but if there is a high demand for off-grid connectivity and storage of your data on your premises, this is the time to say that, because there is a lot of money coming up here, and if you insist on certain features, there's going to be the way that we can build it now that's very expensive, but there is then a business incentive for those equipment manufacturers to find ways to do that cheaper. And that's where softwares like Osmosis come in, because we can make those things like exponentially cheaper with our software. But it's going to be that you guys saying, hey, I'm the buyer, I want this, I don't want the stuff from the last version of the internet where you forgot about us, I want stuff from the new internet that's coming out.
Lisa?
Kind of going back to what Emmett said when I said earlier, I mean, for sustainable, definitely hybrid type networks. I mean, when you're doing the planning, going back to the planning, kind of future proof. I mean, technology is changing and evolving all the time. But, you know, kind of having that hybrid renewable energy, I think is key, especially up here in Alaska. And just to reiterate again, it's a once in a lifetime for the FCC to give free 2.5 spectrum to the tribal nations. I mean, consider it like air, water. It's a valuable asset, and like Emmett said, everyone needs to work together to build out this spectrum. There's a reason why that spectrum's there, and my fear is if it's not built out. At first, I thought the FCC would never claw it back, and they've already taken a lot from Native Americans. They will, So make sure you really realize that the spectrum's valuable. It's important, and it needs to be built out, and do it, collaboratively. So you can, it changes lives. So that's kind of my final thought.
Go ahead, Tim.
One of the other pieces that we haven't really talked about is capacity. When you're building out your networks, you have to plan for the future. Data's never going to be reduced. The demand for data is never going to be reduced. It's always going to be greater and greater. And as you start to deploy these networks, you have to make sure that you're planning for the needs that are coming in the future. If you build it for today, it's going to be obsolete by the time it's built. So that's one area that I think all of us will work very well together on, making sure that capacity is there and the products have the ability to expand in the future as well.
Thank you. We're going to go to audience questions in a minute, but before we do that, I'm going to ask the panelists if they have anything else you'd like to add on the discussion so far.
I'd just like to add to that last comment is exactly what he's saying. Think about it, quadruple the capacity of what you're going to try to build. When Gila River was first deploying our fiber, we thought it was awesome that we were putting 128 strands. These teeny tiny little fibers, literally they are splinters of glass. 128 strands. And back then, Graybar put me through fiber optic splicing school. I don't want to say how long ago, but they sent me to Florida. And I sat there in a classroom and I hand polished every fiber. To do 18 or 36 strands of fiber, like it took hours and hours and hours. But now there's equipment that can do it. It's expensive. So those partnerships are really good. At Gila River, we have one tractor that goes around and plows fields for multiple farmers. And not everybody has to own a tractor. And so not everybody has to own fiber splicing equipment. So those partnerships are so important. But the other really, really important thing is not just to think about the next generation. I'm sure that Joanna is like a second generation telecommunications user, being able to pick up a phone and have dial tone all the time. I'm a second generation telecommunications user, a first generation cellular user, a first generation satellite user, right? But think about your seventh generations, because 5 generations ago, my great-grandfather agreed with the United States government to build a dam to save the water for us during the drought. But 5 generations later, when I was born, we had no water. When you fly into Phoenix, you fly over a 1-mile wide riverbed that is completely dry. And you say, where is the Gila River? Yeah, there's no water in it except when it rains really hard in Tucson or upstream from us. So think about those 7 generations, because there's unintended consequences. So while a satellite might burn up in the atmosphere today, what happens in the atmosphere? Have your high school students do a project. Have your college students do a project. What chemical reaction happens when a satellite hits the atmosphere up here, where the atmosphere is so much more thinner than it is down there where I live? What are the unintended consequences of 7 generations from now? Those are the decisions that we have to think about. What happens when 360 some odd pieces of fiber get cut? What does that do to the animal that's burrowing in the ground? We have little owls that live in our ground down there at Gila River. Who lives in your ground? And what do they mean to the sustenance of your people?
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and go to audience questions. Matt, in the back.
Yeah, sorry, you guys have all the microphones, so, geez. Yeah, I don't know if I can go any further away. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So I wanted to point out that this is terrible. I'll just come up.
This one might work. Here.
It's good to see you. Good to see you. Okay, so no, I wanted to point out that everybody that the audience has heard from today, there's somebody that has built something or is part of something that was built out of necessity to solve these problems. I also want to make sure that we're including, our other partners like the USDA, like NTIA, and as well as people that are not partners that we would love to be partners with, like ATA, as well as the other telecom incumbents. The goal for this is not to pit each other against one another. It was to bring everybody into the same room to explore opportunities to work together to solve these problems. And so this panel and really today was built so that we can have these discussions and start to introduce ourselves to one another and for the communities that actually came down here so that you have an opportunity to look somebody in the eye and tell them what it is that you need and ask, how can we solve these problems? Because until we have these conversations, we can't begin to architect those solutions for the entire state, not just the state, right? But we're going to be the bellwether in the most difficult place in the world to do this, and everybody else is going to follow our lead. And so that was kind of the vision for what we wanted to do 3 years ago when I first met, or 4 years ago when I first met Hallie and Gerad and Christine, and we were talking about the broadband initiatives in the state of Alaska, and so what I know it's late to the party for us to be doing this now, right? But we really want to have these conversations and cultivate the relationships of the people in this room so we can solve these problems long term, and that was it. So, and with that, I really hope that the audience would like to ask some questions of not just the folks up on stage, but everybody else in the room.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. Does anyone in the audience have any questions for the panelists? Yes, in the back.
Just thinking about the offset backup or tape backups, it's been an issue in all of our villages for critical data. Lower 48, you have companies coming in doing that off-site stuff, but in our villages, we're charged for that bandwidth both ways. If we would try to do some server in a shop down the street that's not on site because fires happen, just like we lost a school and all that critical data not too long ago. Has it been tested in any way? I really liked what you were talking about, keeping your communications with inside your network in the community, but how can you do that and not be being charged for it by the providers in the region? I think there's a way to do that, but have you developed anything like that for smaller villages where they have off-site backup for protecting data?
Right now, what we have is the ability to, we have the commercial industrial Wi-Fi networks that are indoor and outdoor that can host that kind of off-grid traffic. And we're launching, I'm going to talk a lot more about this. We're taking some steps in the next couple of months to have that first functionality be off-grid. And we're working with investors and partners right now to get to the next phase, which is within 6 months of receiving funds, we could do off-grid storage at a very low price point, which would allow you to keep your data off-grid. But from and so that's where we are, but that's Wi-Fi only. Our solution is software, so we're not confined to Wi-Fi. Our next steps are to get into other spectra, so that we're able to mesh data and send data across multiple spectrums and have that automatically happen without the user or a network engineer involved. That said, a lot of where I'm at is in that edge. We're trying to push the envelope. I know that Emmett has some stuff that's out today that's doing some of that, and it sounds like Anika does as well. So I'll let them talk about what can be done today.
Emmett says ladies first. So I have sat on our school board. we have several schools. We have some BIA schools, and then we have a school that's established by the state. And we build a technology center on the school district campus. And so there's some servers over there. There's some servers in the district office, which is just a separate building from the rest of the schools, elementary and middle school. And so we push the data over to the district office, but then we also duplicate it in the next door building for the technology center. And they're old Army barracks. They're not anything really crazy or special. They're just buildings that we put together and ram fiber between them, and we have the backup going in one and in the other. And then for the tribe, we build a building, and everybody thought, oh, the IT department's getting that beautiful new building. No, there's nothing in there except for big, huge battery backups and servers and lots of chilling systems, because when I left Phoenix, it was 107 on Saturday. Chilling systems are very important for us to keep our servers alive. But then those tape backups, putting them into fire safes, or I would think you guys would have some kind of water resistant kind of mechanism that you would need to consider, some kind of ceiling. I don't know. Everybody's shaking their heads. There's no such thing. There has to be, because you have submarine, you have fiber optic running under your seas. So there has to be some kind of way to put it in some kind of water ceiling kind of box. But there are things to consider. There are things to ask your kids. There are things to ask your college students. Hey, we need a solution for how are we going to do our backups, keep them local. And consider the boats that are going upstream. Send a backup to the tribe or the community upstream from you, and put them elsewhere outside of your village. And not necessarily, you can physically transport things. You still have mail service, don't you?
So we look at it, there's data, right? There's storage of data, there's storage of information. But when we think about cloud, you also have to think about applications because it is really the application cloud. And applications are the tools that give us, Netflix, but also Google Classroom. And these are applications. So for us, what we did is we built a system that's built on a platform called It's Docker. So they are it's called containerizing your application, and you divide it up, and it allows us to build our own cloud. So we can actually have a cloud that exists on a PC that's about this big. In fact, I could probably put it on my phone, but I can also expand that cloud to be this entire room. So it's infinitely expandable and scalable. But what we really focused on was building the applications that allow us to have talk, text, MMS, video call, all be live, regardless of whether we're connected to the internet or not. So that those communications on a local basis stay up. And it seems like, well, doesn't this exist? And it turns out it's just not. In the lower 48, in a commercial environment, you have maybe 50 fiber lines that run to a single cell phone tower. So you have that redundancy, and you can centralize your core somewhere. Up here, we don't have that. In rural areas, we don't have that. We need a different solution. So that's really what we focused on, is we focused on application development specifically for rural communications.
Thank you for that, panelists. Do we have any other questions from the audience? No other questions at the moment. We've got a few minutes left. I'm going to ask closing remarks. Tim, final thoughts on the topic at hand.
What we've all talked about today, whether the topic is redundancy, whether it's middle mile, it's all about education and information. The information is out there. You have to take it upon yourself to make sure that you're educated for this. Because the more you're educated and the more you can speak in the terms that both the companies that are servicing you, whether they're private or the government, you are then informed and can make informed decisions. And as you make those decisions, think about what the long-term ramifications are for those decisions and how you can make those last multi-generations.
Thank you, Tim. Lisa?
I would just say this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with all this federal funding. Like going back to what Matt said, you've got USDA, NTIA, state funding. There's a lot of funding vehicles out there. So we need to, seize the moment, for lack of a better word, because this really is once in a lifetime to really bring connectivity to our citizens.
Brandon?
I just want to support you all. If you have needs or things that we can be focused on to make sure that the experience that you have with your networks is more valuable, if you give me that information, I'm working with most of the people up here and we'll gladly work with all of them to try to help solve those problems.
Emmett?
I think the key to sustainability is adaptability. It's the only constant we really know of is that it's going to perpetually change. Be prepared for those changes and work together to overcome those things. At the end of the day, it's all about staying power. And the longer that you can stay in the game, the better chances you have at succeeding. And sometimes it'll seem insurmountable. I've been there before. I'm sure that we all have, and just keep fighting.
Thank you. And last but not least, Anika, closing thoughts.
The half pint's going to speak now. I really do echo what they say in, educating yourself, staying with the policy, adaptability. The policy changes, and that sometimes changes what technology you're able to deploy and keep abreast. It changed on us in 2011 and coming into 2012. How carriers compensate each other for carrying each other's traffic really affected our funding mechanisms and how we would pay for our phone company. And when you pick up the phone and you get a fast dial signal, that's a carrier saying, I'm not gonna carry your signal. Make sure you report those things. Report those loss of signal. Report the outages. Contact your carrier. And especially if you're in tribal leadership, make sure they're coming to you on an annual basis. I know it's expensive to travel around this state, but the carriers have the money and the obligation to do so. And so hold them accountable. Make sure they're coming to you and telling you their operating budgets annually and getting your vote as their shareholders, as their membership, if they're a co-op. If they're a GCI, that's an incumbent. They have a legal obligation to maintain that consultation with you annually. So make them do it. And I wish you many blessings, and I wish you safe travel to your homes. And very best of luck at deploying these billions of dollars and making use of them on your networks here in Alaska.
With that, I'd like to thank all of you panelists. This is a really good discussion. I appreciate it. What?
Sorry, there's one more question.
Sorry. I understand the benefit and the need for tribes to educate themselves so that we can have communication. But with it being a two-way street, do you have any ideas on how providers can educate themselves so they can also communicate with the tribes more effectively?
Definitely. Even your big carrier who's privately held can still attend the National Telephone Co-op Association. Co-ops have it figured out. Co-ops know how to involve their memberships. No matter what race they are, They've been extending networks into rural America and to very difficult canyons and different areas. They know how to do it. Go to NTCA. If you can send one member of your community that can somehow get a grasp on this technology stuff, send them. Send them to National Congress of American Indians and go to the technology subcommittee meeting. Go to RES in Vegas. I think it's cheap to fly to Vegas, the Reservation Economics Summit. The USDA is usually there. There's usually some kind of policy people there at RES. Or come to the National Tribal Telecommunications Association. As was mentioned, they have a meeting twice a year, and they do an impact brief. Well, they used to. But we're very abreast of policy as the 12 tribally owned telephone companies across the United States, from Warm Springs to Hopi, which is in canyons. They have difficult terrain as well. Cheyenne River, they've been doing it longer than Gila River. They have a subsidiary, a paper company. They make stationery for all their businesses around their community. There's different areas that you can do. We did the competitive bid too, and we let traffic come across our network from the bedroom communities that are forming outside of Phoenix. We made a company subsidiary that does the premise cabling, runs the wires inside of the building out to where the phone company is going to meet it at the demarcation. And then we made a broadcast corporation. And all of those different entities are bringing in money to help support the telecommunications. So it goes many different directions, but there are experts. Even here at your state capitol, Melissa. Yes, Melissa's here. Stand up, Melissa. She's here. She's back at work yesterday, and we wish her good health coming forward out of her recovery. But Melissa is your Alaskan state person here at the Capitol who can talk to you and help you to understand how you can push, what's going on in Alaska and the plan that you can do in your community and connect you with other resources.
Brandon?
For ISPs and equipment manufacturers and others who are trying to take a step towards the tribes, in my mind, from the technology component, is approach the tribes with an open mind and ask them what they really want, and then don't immediately jump to that equipment doesn't exist today. We don't currently sell those solutions. Go find out if it's available. Go find out if we can do it, because there might be a way to fulfill the customer's needs in a cost-effective way, and it may not be as far away as we think. We spent a lot of time yesterday talking about a couple of things. One was encouraging all the tribes and villages to try to use, I think I heard it today, to use all the different equipments out here, different equipment types out here. A hybrid network will be the solution. Well, let's adopt that same mentality as the provider of those solutions. Let's go find out. I mean, this is a moment where we're merging wireless and fiber technologies, and people aren't great at it yet. But we're trying, right? So let us know how we can make that better and how we can achieve what you want to see from all of us.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the panel. I appreciate your expertise and your time.